Most people who have read the story of David and Goliath picture a lucky boy with a rock, a desperate gamble, a miracle that defied all logic. But what if that reading strips away something essential? Something that changes not just how we see that moment, but how we understand an entire world built around the mastery of releasing, not just launching. What did it actually mean to wield a sling in the ancient Near East? Why did armies of Israel, Assyria, and Rome invest heavily in slingers long before the crossbow ever existed? And why did the most experienced warriors of the ancient world understand something that modern eyes almost universally miss? That the critical moment in both sling and bow was never the draw, never the tension, but the release, stay until the end, because understanding this changes how we read not just the story of David, but the entire way Jesus spoke about power, restraint, and the moment that determines everything. Walk into the hill country of Judea sometime around the 10th century, before the Common Era. The air carries dust and dry heat by midday, but mornings are cool enough to raise the small hairs on your arms. The terrain is uneven, limestone outcroppings, shallow valleys, sparse scrubland that provides cover, but never comfort. Villages here are not fortified cities. They are clusters of stone houses built close together for warmth and mutual protection, surrounded by terraced fields carved by hand into hillsides that have resisted every generation that tried to tame them. If this channel has been helping you see the biblical world more clearly, consider subscribing, because we are only beginning to uncover how much the land itself shaped the people who walked it, and how deeply that shapes the words we have inherited from them. A boy growing up in this landscape learns to use a sling before he learns to plow, not because it is a toy, because sheep wander, predators circle. The distance between a flock and a wolf is measured in seconds, and a thrown stone covers ground far faster than a running shepherd. The sling is not a weapon of war in the mind of a child. It is a tool of daily survival, practiced the way a farmer's daughter learns to grind grain, repetitively with correction, until the motion becomes inseparable from the body itself. The sling itself is almost insultingly simple. 2 cords of braided wool or leather, each roughly the length of a forearm, connected at one end to a small pouch woven flat to cradle a stone. The entire instrument weighs almost nothing. You could fold it and hide it in your palm. Yet in trained hands, it was capable of launching a stone the size of a large egg at velocities that modern testing has measured between 100 and 150 kilometers per hour, faster than most baseball pitches, with a projectile 3 to 4 times heavier. The draw was not the skill. Any person with a shoulder could spin a sling. The skill, the thing that separated a shepherd from a warrior and a warrior from a master, was the release. The exact fraction of a second in which the fingers loosened their hold on one cord and allowed the stone to continue forward while the pouch fell away behind it. Release too early, and the stone climbs uselessly into the sky. Release too late, and it drives itself into the earth. The window of precision is almost impossibly narrow. Nothing in that world was accidental. The same principle governed the bow. It is tempting to imagine the ancient archer as a figure of raw strength, a man who pulls back a heavy drawweight and holds, trembling, until the moment feels right, and strength certainly mattered. A composite bow used by Assyrian infantry or a Judean soldier carried drawweights that would exhaust an untrained arm within minutes. The physical demand was real, but the warriors who trained with bows from childhood understood something that separated accuracy from brute effort. Holding longer did not improve the shot. It destroyed it. The human arm, under sustained tension, begins to shake. Imperceptibly at first, then in ways that translate directly into the arrow's flight. The muscles responsible for maintaining the draw are not the same muscles that release cleanly. They work against each other, and so the archer who trained correctly learned to draw, align, and release in a single fluid motion, not to hold and wait, but to move through the moment without interrupting it. Ancient archery instructors, as documented in later Assyrian and Persian military records, describe this as the difference between fighting the bow and trusting it. The bow was designed to release energy that had been stored. The archer's role was not to control that energy indefinitely. It was to direct it at the precise moment of letting go. In the villages of ancient Israel, archery was less common than the sling among common people, partly because of cost. A good composite bow, layered with horn, sinew, and wood, and requiring months to construct properly, was a significant material investment, the kind of equipment associated with professional soldiers, tribal warriors, or men of some means. The sling, by contrast, could be made from materials available in any household. But both weapons shared this same irreducible truth. The outcome was determined at the moment of release, not the moment of preparation. This distinction mattered enormously in a society organized around honor, precision, and consequence. In the ancient Near East, reputation was not an abstraction. It was a social currency that determined access to marriage alliances, trade agreements, land disputes, and communal protection. A man known to be skilled with a sling or bow carried that reputation the way a craftsman carried the mark of his work, publicly, consequentially. A single missed shot during a tribal skirmish was not just a tactical failure. It could be remembered for years, spoken of in the gate, referenced in a dispute decades later as evidence of a man's steadiness or lack of it. The pressure of that cultural weight shaped how men trained. Boys in Judea and Galilee practiced not in silence, but in community. Other eyes watched. Older men corrected. The standards were transmitted not through written manuals, but through demonstration, repetition, and the quiet verdict of those who had mastered the form before you. A boy who released early, who lost his nerve in the final fraction of a second, was not simply told to try again. He was shown, sometimes, by having an elder guide his arm through the motion, what it felt like to let go at the right moment. To release correctly was to be trustworthy. To flinch was to be unreliable. That connection between physical precision and moral character ran through the entire fabric of ancient Israelite life in ways that modern readers rarely pause to consider. Jesus grew up in Galilee. This is stated so often in Christian tradition that it has lost almost all of its texture. Galilee was not a quiet pastoral backdrop for spiritual teachings. It was a region of working people, fishermen, farmers, carpenters, stonecutters, and soldiers who understood effort, precision, and consequence in deeply physical terms. The men in the villages around Nazareth knew what a sling felt like in the hand. They had watched boys practice in the fields. They had heard the crack of a stone finding its mark and the silence that followed a miss. When Jesus spoke, he spoke to people whose entire understanding of skill, trust, and outcome was formed by exactly this kind of physical knowledge. Consider the parable of the sower, which appears in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. A man goes out to sow seed. Some falls on the path, some on rocky ground, some among thorns, and some on good soil. Modern readers often focus on the soil, on what kind of person receives the message. But the people listening to Jesus on that hillside heard something else first. They heard the sower. They knew what it meant to cast seed with precision. They knew the difference between a hand that released at the right moment, evenly, at the right height, with the right arc, and one that hesitated, clutched, or released poorly, Sewing by hand is not so different from slinging by hand. Both require a practiced release. Both punish hesitation. Both are determined not by the preparation, but by the letting go. The crowd did not need Jesus to explain the mechanics. They lived them. What he was doing was taking a physical truth they had built into their bodies through years of labor and pointing it towards something they had not yet fully seen. That the same quality of release, of trusting the motion beyond the moment of control, applied to the way a person lives in relationship to God, to others, and to the future they cannot fully manage. This is not metaphor for its own sake. It is precision teaching. Jesus was not reaching for a convenient image. He was naming something his audience already knew in their muscles and their memories. The same logic appears in his words about anxiety. In the Sermon on the Mount, recorded in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus speaks about the birds of the air, who do not sow or reap or store in barns, and the flowers of the field, clothed more beautifully than Solomon. The passage is often read as gentle comfort. But in the context of a society where a failed harvest meant not just hunger, but debt, displacement, and the dissolution of a family's standing, where every decision about when to plant, when to release seed into soil that might receive it or reject it, carried enormous weight. These words carried a different gravity. Jesus was not dismissing the real difficulty of that moment of release. He was acknowledging it fully and then pointing past it. The archer who trusted the bow did not stop training. He trained harder so that when the moment came, the release was not a leap into uncertainty, but a motion so deeply practiced it could be trusted completely. The sower who released seed into uncertain soil did not stop farming. He prepared the ground as carefully as possible and then opened his hand. To those listening, this was not abstract theology. It was a reframing of something they did every single day. Return now to the valley where David stood. The account in 1 Samuel chapter 17 is precise in ways that are easy to read past. David does not simply pick up a stone and throw it. The text records that he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, not jagged rocks, not whatever was nearest, but smooth stones, water-worn, aerodynamically consistent. The kind that a practiced slinger selects deliberately because irregular surfaces cause unpredictable rotation and unpredictable flight. He placed one in his pouch. He ran toward Goliath, and he released. Everything in that sequence reflects the knowledge of someone trained from childhood. The selection of the stone, the single stone placed in the pouch, not several grabbed in panic. The forward movement, experienced slingers do not stand still. They move into the throw, transferring body momentum into the stone's velocity, and the release, at the precise moment, toward the only exposed point on an armored man's body. This was not luck. This was mastery expressed under pressure, but there is something else in that account that the physical detail illuminates. Goliath, seeing David approach without conventional armor or spear, speaks with contempt. He sees a boy with a shepherd's tool. What he cannot see, what contempt always prevents a person from seeing, is the thousands of hours of practiced release that stand behind that apparently simple gesture. He measures the preparation and dismisses it. He never sees the release coming. The Philistine army saw a sling. They did not see what the sling had become in trained hands. This pattern of visible simplicity concealing deep, practiced power runs through the entire ministry of Jesus in ways that his contemporaries also struggled to see. The religious authorities of Jerusalem looked at a carpenter from Nazareth speaking in parables about farmers and shepherds and lost coins, and they saw the surface. They measured the preparation by their own standards and found it unimpressive. They did not recognize that they were witnessing a different kind of mastery entirely, one that had been formed not in the temple schools, but in the lived world of ordinary people. shaped by exactly the kind of physical knowledge that filled every day of Galilean life. When Jesus healed, he did not perform elaborate ritual. He spoke or touched, or made mud from dirt and saliva, the simplest materials available, and released something that changed everything. When he taught, he did not quote extensively from other scholars or build elaborate theological architecture. He reached into the immediate world around him: a fig tree, a coin, a woman's lost sheep, a man releasing seed into uncertain ground, and pointed. The release was always the moment, not the preparation, not the tension, not the accumulation of force, the moment of opening the hand, trusting the motion, allowing what had been gathered to go where it needed to go. There is a reason the Gospel accounts describe the people who heard Jesus as astonished, not just impressed, but struck by something they had not expected. They had heard teachers before. They knew what careful preparation looked like. What they encountered in Jesus was something that felt, to people who understood, precision in their bones, like a release perfectly timed. Nothing wasted, nothing held back unnecessarily, everything arriving exactly where it needed to land. The stone did not miss. It never does, when the hand that releases it has spent a lifetime learning how.